So I'm Jess, I'm the editor-in-chief of the MISC, and I will be co-moderating this debate for the Executive Board of Fall 2020 and Spring 2021. We're going to have the candidates introduce themselves as we go along, but why don't we start by having some of our moderators introduce themselves. Lucy?
I'm Lucy, I'm a senior editor at the MISC, and I'm going to be typing a transcript of this debate, which we're going to be posting on our social media platforms after, along with a recorded video.
I am Frankie, the managing editor of the MISC. I'm going to be timing candidate responses. I'll be screen sharing a timer so you guys can see how much time is left for your responses. And I'll be moderating the chat and monitoring the waiting room.
Awesome, thank you guys. So welcome and thank you to everybody who could make it today. I know we've been in touch over the past week about how this debate is going to be structured and run, but I thought we would deliver a quick overview again for everybody's sake. So first, please note that we are recording the meeting. It's being recorded right now. We're going to cut out all of the beginning part though. So any students who don't want to be seen in a video published by the MISC after this conference can turn off their video component, and that also applies for anybody who's going to be speaking, any of the candidates. We also ask that anybody who's not answering a question should remain muted. And anybody who is viewing the debate after it's over, please note that attendance was optional given the various circumstances in which we find ourselves. So any candidate who wishes to publicize their platform but couldn't attend this debate has also been invited to do so alongside this video. Finally, we're hoping that we can set a tone that relieves some of the pressure that running an election during this time causes. We have to keep in mind that we're all living very stressful lives, and to accommodate those conditions, we're hoping to set a calmer, friendlier, and less competitive tone if possible. So to that end, we know that there can be high pressure to say everything that you need to in a limited amount of time. And in order to reduce that pressure, the MISC invites everybody, all the candidates here tonight or not, to send us a tweet on anything you would like to reiterate before midnight tonight. And we can publish that on our Twitter. Finally, for those who are running in positions that are not unopposed tonight, while this is a debate in an effort to foster a friendlier environment, we will not be having any direct responses to one another, just merely answering the same questions that everybody's going to be asked. You, of course, can comment on one another's platforms if appropriate in your own responses. But here's how the debate is going to be structured. So we'll start with the candidate for VSA president, and we will proceed to VSA vice president and in the order that we established and sent around in the election guide. Each candidate is going to be allotted 30 seconds for an opening statement. That should include your name, the position you're running for, and your pronouns. Then we're going to ask everybody 2 questions. You will have 1 minute to answer each of those questions. And after that, we're going to take any questions that student constituents had sent in prior to this debate via email or sent in the chat box on the Zoom conference, if there are any. After we answer those questions, candidates will have 1 minute to deliver a closing statement. So we'll be muting and unmuting attendees to allow people equal speaking time. And Frankie, who is currently the Miscellany news box, they're going to be sharing a timer, so you'll be able to be apprised of how much time you have remaining as you're answering the questions. Do we have any questions from any of the candidates before we dive in? I'm looking at the chat box right now. Wonderful. So with that, we're going to try and dive in. We're going to have a friendly and respectful debate, and really just use this time to listen to and explore each other's great ideas. Awesome. So with that, why don't we begin with our candidate for president, Prashit. We're going to unmute you, and we'll begin with a 30-second opening statement. Please include your name, pronouns, and the position that you're running for. I guess we can move on to our vice president candidate. That is Joshua. Joshua, are you prepared to deliver a 30-second opening statement, including your name, pronouns, and the position that you're running for? Awesome. Okay, I will unmute you and you can get started. Are you ready? Okay.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
There we go.
Hi, my name is Joshua Lacoste. I use he, him, his pronouns. I'm a rising senior and a biochemistry major, French and Francophone studies correlate here at Vassar. Currently, I'm involved with varsity track, Habitat for Humanity, a cappella, and I'm a 2021 senator. And I'm really looking forward to our conversation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So we'll now ask you 2 questions. You'll have 1 minute to answer each. My first question is, the Vice President chairs the Board of Strategic Planning, and in this capacity, you would be asked to facilitate long-term planning for the VSA. How would you work to imagine potential improvements to the functioning of the VSA, and how would you be able to respond to the changing needs of the student community?
Thank you so much for that question. I think it's important to come in with set goals for the future, but also be adaptable and flexible to fit the college's needs. From a logistical standpoint, I do think that I have many specific short-term and long-term goals for the future of this college. These range from short-term goals such as rewording the VSA bylaws to kind of eliminate outdated wording and promote more inclusive language, but also some long-term goals such as working with the Environmental Action Committee to set up more concrete long-term visions for making Vassar more sustainable. But as I mentioned earlier, I think it's really critical to be flexible to the students' needs. So in that regard, I'd work with the rest of VSA, especially class senators, to kind of understand what students' concerns are. I would also utilize my weekly office hours and work in tandem with the VSA interns as a way to kind of understand what the needs are in the student community and how we can best address these topics.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So on to the second question. You will also have 1 minute to answer this one. One aspect of your prospective position is to serve as a student representative on the Committee of Admissions and Financial Aid. How do you plan to advocate for applicants to help ensure that Vassar admits students from a variety of backgrounds?
Sure. Thank you for that question. That's something that's pretty important to me as I rely heavily on financial aid. That's the only reason why I can attend Vassar. Over the past couple of years, I've really enjoyed volunteering with the admissions office. So I've done a lot of different things from hosting prospective students to helping with Admitted Students Day and even volunteering with specific admissions programming such as Focus Weekend, which just happened, which allows admitted students from diverse backgrounds to kind of come and experience the Vassar campus and community. So I've definitely learned a lot through these experiences, and I've met a lot of different students, and I know that I'll be able to bring a unique perspective to this committee and definitely be able to advocate on students' behalf.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now we have questions from the audience. We have time for a maximum of 2 questions. I see that we have received one from a student, and you will have 1 minute to answer these questions, but I'm going to wait another minute in case somebody's typing out another one. Okay, so if anybody wants to finish up asking a second question, you are welcome to, but it's also fine if we only have one. So let's move on to your audience question. So this year, the campus has been rocked by 2 controversies. We have protests and so we've had a series of protests, one of which is to the current grading policy. And during both of the protests that are being referenced, I know that a lot of students have had the question of where is the VSA? So what role, if any, do you think the VSA should have in moderating controversies between student groups or between students and the administrators? You have 1 minute.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that question. I think something that's really important is to kind of promote conversation and promote an easier environment for people to be able to share their concerns. A lot of times I feel like students feel like their opinions and concerns are brushed off by the administration. In regards to where is the VSA, I was serving as a class of 21 senator this past semester as I was abroad in the fall. And I know it might not have seemed as that we took as active of a stance as we could towards a lot of these topics, but we do a lot of behind the scenes work regarding these things with the different committees that we're on. But I do think that moving forward into the future, the VSA could hold more of an active stance in kind of demonstrating what students' concerns are and bringing those up to administrators to making sure that everyone's voices were heard.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We have another question from the audience. What was the biggest success and the biggest failure of the current VSA Executive Board? What would you do differently? You have 1 minute.
Awesome. I wasn't on VSA Exec Board this year, so I don't know if I can comment on what their biggest success or failure was. Also a little bit harder for me since I was abroad for half the year. But things I would do differently, I definitely would take a lot of what has been done in the past and definitely speak with Jenny about what their biggest successes and failures were this past year and see how I can kind of put my own mark onto that and kind of make this position into something where I see my vision moving forward. And like I mentioned before, a lot of that has to do with long-term goals of mine that I would set. As the VSA Vice President is mainly responsible for maintaining VSA Senate and making sure that everything's functioning and proper and working properly. So that would be kind of my big focus. I would take my different experiences and the kinds of people I've met over the past 3 years to kind of make that my own.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for that response. Now we have time for a 1 minute closing statement. Are you ready?
Yes.
Awesome. All right, we'll begin now.
Yeah, thank you everyone for taking the time to come out here and kind of listen to this conversation. I wanted to thank the MISC for hosting this event, all the other candidates for putting yourselves out there, and everyone in the audience listening. I know I'm really excited for the future. I have a lot of really awesome ideas about where I see this moving forward, and I'm really looking forward to continuing this conversation. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Joshua. Prashit, we're going to go in the same order that we just went with Joshua. Why don't we begin with a 30-second opening statement? It should include your name, pronouns, and the position that you're running for.
All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Prashit Parikh. I'm running for VSA President. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I look forward to speaking with you today.
Thank you. So now we'll move on and ask you 2 questions. You will have 1 minute to answer each. The first question is, what is your primary platform issue, if any, and how do you seek to use the VSA's resources to address that issue? You have 1 minute.
Okay, yeah. So I think one big theme that I've kind of seen through my previous leadership experiences is like lack of communication, whether it be like, I know when the student fellow role was transitioning and I was House President, there's a lot of like misleading conversations that were happening, along with also like some VSA things that happened this year in terms of like action being done. And so my goal is to basically use my position to coordinate between administration, board of trustees, whoever might be in these larger positions with the student body, to kind of like mediate conversation through like meetings I would have with them and forms in my emails, just so that there's that transparency and people know what's going on, so that there's not like any hindrance of progress moving forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So the second question is, accessibility to and advocacy for students is one of the top responsibilities of VSA elects. How can you stay connected to constituents, particularly in the event that we are learning remotely next semester, but even if we're on campus?
Okay, yeah, so I think that the biggest thing I can do is basically learn everything I can from this year's VSA exec, whether it be Carlos, Jenny, or the rest of the exec board, just making sure that we set everything up correctly moving forward. We have had some experience. I've been a 21 senator as well with Joshua this past semester, and I think we've gotten some experience running Senate in that form. And so maybe just moving forward, even like improving that communication. I think in terms of advocating for people who may not be able to have the same resources, that can be done through my email. Just like checking in with students more frequently than not, and just like ensuring that everyone's okay, whether it be through my email outlets or like meetings personally, office hours. I just want to utilize my time effectively so that anybody who has concerns is able to voice them effectively.
Wonderful, thank you. So we now have time for 2 audience questions. You will have 1 minute to respond each, and I will give us a few seconds to type out any questions. I also believe that one of the first question I asked the previous candidate is intended for all VSA candidates. So if we don't have another audience question, I will also ask that to everybody. Okay, so we have our first new audience question. The question is, how is President Bradley doing? And what would you change about her leadership? You have 1 minute.
Okay, yeah. So I actually also have basically chaired traditions this year. I've taken on that role a little bit later in the year, but that has allowed me to work very closely with President Bradley. I think she is doing her best. You know, this is like a very unprecedented time. There's a lot of challenges that arise with anything from NAGPRA to the grading system, and also the the other issues mentioned before in the chat. And so I think that the way that I would change her leadership is just, again, better communication, maybe holding her more accountable, whether that be through conversations, communication, just making sure that whatever steps she's taking, she's like, conversating with like us as a VSA exec, other student members, just making sure that she's really looking at all of the viewpoints. But I think overall that I think we'll be able to strike a pretty healthy balance there.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I'm going to give us a couple more seconds to get a new question, and if not, I will go back to the other question. I'm not sure the best way to tell if somebody's in the middle of typing. So I'm doing my best scrolling around. All right. It doesn't look like anybody is typing, but I'll give it 1 more second. Okay, cool. Well, thank you so much. We're going to go back to the other question. Again, it says, this year the campus has been rocked by 2 controversies, that by the Israel-Palestine speaker and the protests by SJP, and the current grading during quarantine controversy. And during both of these, I knew that a lot of students had the question of, where is the VSA? So what role, if any, do you think the VSA should have in monitoring controversies between student groups or between students and the administrators? And you have 1 minute.
Yeah, thanks so much for that. I think that the main role of the VSA, again, is to advocate for students, right? That's why we're here. That's why we're mainly student-led. And so I think that we should definitely take a stance. However, there are rules in place, and so I want to do my best to take a stance while still following those. I know with the SJP controversy, we did do our best to craft a statement and kind of put it out there. But again, that has to go through ops and just like, really be checked so that the language is inclusive for all students and really doing the best to benefit everybody. And so I think that we could really make a change in terms of how we move forward in taking that stance on the behalf of students. And again, transparency, like there is work being done in all of these fields, but I just think we have to do a better job of communicating that to the student body so that people are aware that it's actually happening.
Wonderful, thank you so much. We will now give you 1 minute to give a closing statement. Are you all set?
Yeah.
Okay, awesome.
All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciated speaking with you. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out via email. I look forward to doing great work next year if I'm elected. And I just want to make Vassar a great place for students. I know I've enjoyed my complete experience here in the 3 years that I've done so far. And I know there's going to be challenges moving forward with the remote learning and everything that's going to change next year, returning to campus. But I'm looking forward to taking that on with the executive board and the rest of the Senate and VSA as a whole. So thanks for that.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Prashit.
Thank you.
Okay, so we are going to move on to the chair of academics. I believe that we have Susanna here. Hi, Susanna. I'm just going to check to see if any other candidates are here real quick. Okay, wonderful. Wonderful. So we are going to have the same structure that we just had with the previous 2 candidates. So why don't we begin with a 30-second opening statement. It should include your name, pronouns, and the position that you're running for.
I'm a rising senior and I'm a rising senior. I'm Susanna Karen. I use she, her, hers, and I'm running for the chair of academics. I'm a philosophy major and a music minor, and my goal is to really help foster an academic environment where everyone can succeed and feel comfortable for the next year and beyond.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now we're going to move on to the MISC's 2 questions. You'll have 1 minute to answer each. Our first question is, the Chair of Academics serves as a liaison between the Dean of Faculty Division and the Dean of Studies Division. How would you advocate for students whose voices go unheard in decisions made by faculty? How would you ensure that students have an accurate sense of the faculty's decision-making process?
I believe that it's crucial to raise concerns to faculty members that may not even be on their radar, because this issue is really affecting everyone uniquely. And so as a student, I think that there's a much greater opportunity for open dialogue, whether it's informal just through email or conversation over Zoom or on campus or during like more formal office hours. But I still believe that there's an increased sense of comfort because it's student-to-student communication. And so I would use my conversations in these settings to amplify whatever concerns come up to faculty. And I think that the best way to give an accurate sense of faculty's decision-making process is to ensure that there are more students in the room. And so I ideally would like to restructure the role of the CCP so that it includes more students and everyone can have their voices shared and it's not such a game of telephone.
Wonderful, thank you. So you sort of touched upon what my next question was. The other committee that you'll be sitting on is the Committee on Curricular Policy, the CCP. You talked a little bit about how to make yourself available to students, but how would you ensure that students have an accurate sense of the decision-making policy in that room, particularly given the authority that those faculty have over the grading policy?
I would like to really create more opportunities for them to openly converse so that it's not just exclusively going through me. And so if we're in person in the fall, creating meetings between the divisions of Dean of Studies and Dean of Faculty and students or over Zoom. And so I think that way it's kind of just more than me amplifying their voice and them having the opportunity to share their voices themselves.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So we're gonna have time for 2 questions from the audience. I will give everybody a few seconds to type them out. Yeah. Okay, so we have received our first question. We have, how do you plan to address the issue of textbook accessibility? You have 1 minute to respond.
I think that it definitely needs to be a combined effort between both my role and also finance. I think that there could potentially be room to reallocate funding to ensure that all students have access to textbooks, also working with teachers to ensure that the textbook they're using is the most cost-effective but doesn't necessarily sacrifice quality in that, and to ensure that students are not unnecessarily burdening themselves by purchasing textbooks, whether it be finding like digital versions or having some sort of textbook exchange program more officially implemented in place.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So we have our second audience question now. It reads, you said that you would increase the number of students on the CCP, but the governance establishes the number of seats allocated to the VSA. How would you accomplish that goal? And you have 1 minute.
I think that is something where obviously it would be quite ambitious to try to restructure that. I think in light of the situation going on this year, a lot of students feel that there need to be more student voices in the room. And so I'm hoping that that could be an opportunity to perhaps alter those guidelines. If that is not the case, then I'm hoping that there can kind of be student voices in the room other way, whether it's typed letters from students that include their own words, so it's not just kind of my translation of their words, but keeping their thoughts and ideas and needs as authentic as possible.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So we will move on to the 1 minute closing statement. Are you all set?
Yes.
Awesome.
The next school year, kind of regardless of whether it occurs in September in person or is altered in any number of ways, is really going to be challenging for any number of reasons. And so I'm really committed, if I were to be your chair of academics, to create an environment where people can succeed academically and to mitigate any academic stressors, stress that can arise between student communication with faculty and administration, so that that doesn't exacerbate the stress that's already kind of occurring in our world right now.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming, Susanna. And we will move on to the Chair of Equity of Inclusion. I believe that is Gabrielle. Are you here? Let me unmute them.
Yes, I'm here.
Wonderful. Hi. So we're going to go with the same structure that we just went through. We will begin with a 30-second opening statement. You should include your name, pronouns, and the position that you're running.
Hi, everyone. My name is Gabby James. I am a rising junior. I am running for the Chair of Equity and Inclusion. I use she, her pronouns.
Thank you so much. So we can move on to the two questions. You will have 1 minute to answer each of them. So the MISC's first question is, there are many barriers to equity and inclusion in the college experience. What do you see as one of these major obstacles, and how would you begin to address the barrier that you have identified?
Okay. I recognize that all students are at different levels of immersion, experience, interest, and concern throughout the college, and I realize that we're going to have some sort of understanding the value of contributing as a whole to Vassar. And one of my jobs is that would be as this chair is working with different groups on campus, so recognizing and collaborating with all of them as well, while recognizing that we're all at different levels of understandings and accessibility and inclusion. And so I see that as being able to communicate effectively amongst all of those groups and amongst all of those students.
Wonderful, thank you so much. Yeah, so I guess sort of to respond to that with another question, as one of the few student voices available in a number of administrative offices that affect the equity of student experiences, how do you see your place in these spaces? And how can you make your voice heard as the student voice of students that you represent within the administration?
One of the things that I would like to work on with this position is creating a space that allows for students, faculty, and administration to collaborate with each other, so that all of the possible concerns are voiced as well, and so that we all have some sort of transparency and communication among us. I haven't really been involved with the VSA before this, so all of this would be new to me and collaborating with everyone, and I would hope that as a team we could all get through it together, like I said, with communication and transparency, and me being able to effectively communicate back to everybody else on the exec board, everybody else in the VSA, and all of the other students, to make sure that any concerns are voiced among administration, faculty, and the overall student body.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So we're going to have a little bit of time for 2 questions from the audience. I'm going to give us a minute again to type them out, and we'll see what we have. Wonderful. So it looks like we have 2 questions for you. The first one reads, do you have any concrete goals or areas that you feel need improvement that you can directly impact as the chair of equity and inclusion? And you have 1 minute.
I mentioned it before, but I'm not sure if any groups like are if there are any certain groups on campus that have administration, faculty, and students meeting regularly to focus on any sort of goals. So if there's an issue on campus that happens and many students are concerned, I realize that often it's communication that is sort of their goals among the students, like being able to hear what the administration and is thinking. So possibly creating some sort of group that has all of these, has students, faculty, and students meeting regularly in order to communicate any concerns that the student body has. So possibly working with that.
Thank you so much. And the second audience question is, how would you handle a violation of equity and/or inclusion on campus? And you have 1 minute.
With this position, I realized that a lot of a violation of equity and/or inclusion on campus, that my voice is important and crucial, but I would also look for direction in the rest of the executive board and the rest of VSA, and making sure that I hear all of the voices that are among the students. And I would want to make sure that I have an accurate understanding of the violation, equity, and inclusion that happened, because I personally, I may not have like a concrete understanding of what happened. So I'd want to make sure that I understand completely what's happening, understand what the students want, and understand what we can do as a group to sort of solve the issue at hand.
Thank you so much for that answer. So now we'll move on to the closing statement. You will have 1 minute. Are you all set?
Yes.
Awesome.
Thank you again to the MISC for having this debate amongst everything that's happening. Thank you to everyone that's watching. Thank you to all the other candidates who were able to make it to participate. Thank you to all the other people who are asking questions and who are being actively involved. Like I said, amidst everything that's happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabrielle. So with that, we'll move on to the Chair of Finance. Is Nicole here? Let's see. Hi, Nicole. I see you. I'll unmute. Awesome. So we will begin with the same ordering. We'll start with a 30-second opening statement. Please include your name, pronouns, and the position that you're running for.
Okay, hello. I'm Nicole. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a rising junior, biochem, and math double major. I've been on finance committee for 2 years. All years I've been at Vassar, and I've been the co-chair of finance this year, and worked closely with Emily to learn the ropes and the behind the scenes. So I hope I can bring all that knowledge this year to help out treasurers and the student body.
Thank you so much. So we'll move on to the 2 questions. You will have 1 minute to answer each of them. The first question is, the process for applying for VSA funding and/or appealing finance committee decisions is often described as complex and convoluted. How would you go about clarifying the process and ensuring that students know what must be done in order to secure funding that they need to implement programming?
Of course. So great question. One we get a lot of the time. So first of all, training for treasurers would be as clear and concise as possible, as accessible as possible, and hopefully during this training, we would lay out all the resources necessary to apply for funding or appeal for funding. Obviously, just like the current chair of finance has, all the resources will be in her, in my signature. So documents will all be there. It'll be in a Google Drive so people can easily figure out what resources they need, where to go for them. We have all that laid out already, so it's just making sure that students know where that is and that it's accessible. And also maybe just a little flow chart telling them how to do everything, just making sure everything's very clear. And my email will always be open, so people can always email me if they have any questions, all that good stuff.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So you sort of touched on this. You talked about clarity for treasurers and in their training. But what ways do you plan to make yourself as an individual very approachable, and what steps can you take to make treasurers' jobs as understandable and seamless as possible? And you have 1 minute.
Of course. So same thing, just try not to be intimidating. We're creating those good working relationships with all treasurers and trying to be as open as possible to questions. Just using friendly language so that they come to us. Like, we're not a scary like entity at all. We want people to come and ask us questions. We want people to be using those fundings and putting on that great programming. So just being as accessible as possible via email, via office hours, making sure there are times that people can come to and ask questions openly, so they can figure out what they need to get done. Yeah, that's essentially it.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we'll move on to the audience questions portion. I'll give everybody a few minutes to type. Okay, so we have our first audience question. The question reads, is the VSA budget large enough? And would you advocate for an increase in the students' activities fee? You have 1 minute.
So in my opinion, based off this year of experience, I think the VSA budget is more than large enough. We haven't had any issues with running out of funding in any way, and we can always move things from different funds if necessary. So the discretionary fund is kind of like a large fund where if needed, we can move funds from there into other sources that may need it, like pre-orgs or speakers or conferences. I would not advocate for an increase in the student activities fee. I think it's plenty as is right now, and I think we have plenty of resources to do what we need to do and give orgs the funding they need. I don't see this being an issue. We'll see how, since everything's a little up in the air right now, how this proceeds next year, but I would not advocate for an increase as of right now. Tuition's already very expensive.
Thank you. I'll give everybody a second to type up another question, and yeah. I'm finding that the exercise of like waiting for people to type it has me at the edge of my seat. I'm gonna wait another minute, and if there isn't a second one, since everybody else so far has had 2, I have a backup one. Okay. All right, so it looks like, I will be asking my backup question. You talked about making yourself accessible to treasurers and people who need to be aware of budget concerns, but there are a lot of orgs on campus, so you will be in contact with many treasurers. How do you plan to have individualized relationships?
Great question. So again, like just having those open working relationships, reaching out if needed, because we try to keep very pristine records of like who's turning in their stuff, who's not, and just reaching out to those treasurers and making sure that they know they have the resources if needed, and keeping up to date with all those clubs and all those clubs leadership. Just like a check-in email like, hey, what's going on? Is everything okay with your org? Do you guys need any help with anything, funding, all that fun stuff? And just like being as open as possible, and so people can like stop me in the D's and be like, hey, I have a quick finance question, or just like wherever they are on campus, just say like, hey, come ask me all the questions you have, and if they need anything. Yeah, that's essentially it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. So we'll now move on to the closing statement portion. You will have 1 minute. Are you all set?
Sounds good. So thank you so much to the MIS for hosting this, especially in kind of these wild times. It's really great that you guys could put this on for us. And I'm excited to hopefully work with all the other candidates and all the other exec board this coming year. Hopefully we can make it a good one, whether it's remote, push back a little, in person, whatever happens with it. I'm excited to work with everybody and make it a great year, get finance organized, have a great year with committee, have a great year with my interns. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Nicole. And we can move on now to the chair of organizations. Is Alistair here? Yes.
Here I am.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good.
Awesome. So again, same structure. We'll begin with a 30-second opening statement. Please include your name, pronouns, and the position that you're running for.
Awesome. Hi, my name is Alistair Toller, he, him. I'm a rising sophomore, a prospective political science major, and I'm running for chair of orgs.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So we'll move on to the question portion. You will have 1 minute to answer 2 different questions. The first question that we have is, programming with the Campus Activities Office is a central task of this position. Do you think that we have enough org programming as is? Okay, so you're back now, but we didn't hear you at first. Can you start again?
Can you hear? Yeah,
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thank you.
Okay, and just could you again repeat the question? I'm sorry, my sound was being troublesome.
No worries at all. Okay, so the question, it's all good. The question was, programming with the Campus Activities Office is a central task of this position. How do you think that we have enough org programming as is? And you'll have 1 minute.
Okay, perfect. When it comes to org programming, I think that most Vassar students would agree that there's a lot of it. And for the most part, it's enjoyable. I know my first year at Vassar was extremely enjoyable. I didn't feel like I needed to go off campus like a lot of my other friends do at other colleges to find entertainment. Whether it's a cappella shows, comedy shows, big night in events, or any other programming, there's a lot of it. But what I think is more important is trying to figure out and be a resource for students who want to create new org programming that they feel like wouldn't necessarily be feasible. Whether that's in helping them to and guiding them towards what funds to use and go to the chair of finance, or really just to try and work with the Campus Activities Office. I think we can increase the org programming and hit the ground running next fall.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now we have a little bit more of a philosophical question. So one major part of this position is dealing with upcoming orgs or groups of students that are applying to become an org. So what do you think makes for a trusted, effective, and valuable student organization?
Great question. And this is one that we've dealt a lot with this past year. When it comes to being a trusted org, I think transparency goes both ways. The VSA wants orgs to be transparent, just like orgs and students want the VSA to be transparent. So this looks like having clear communication with all the exec board members who deal readily with orgs. And when it comes to establishing new pre-orgs, or whether or not pre-orgs would be bumped up to org status, this simply would be implemented in the sense that clear communication, their finances are in order, and pretty much just being inclusive in their org practices. So all of that combined would make for a fantastic org, and I think most of the orgs on campus do this now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So now we'll have some time for the audience to submit questions. We will twiddle our thumbs and wait for a minute. Sorry.
Yeah, twiddling.
Part would make me nervous. Okay. We have, oh, did you unmute me? Thank you. Okay, so we have our first audience question. Why has Vassar failed to attract any famous speakers in the past couple of years? No Clintons, no Obamas, no famous bands or artists or singers or actors. What will you do to ensure that famous individuals are brought to campus as part of student activities? You have 1 minute to answer.
Well, sadly, I don't have any famous connections right now. While I would love to have the Obamas on speed dial, I can't necessarily be that liaison between the two. But we do have a lot of alumni connections. So whether that be Meryl Streep or John Leguizamo, we have a lot of, famous alumni, or Lisa Kudrow. All of those are Vassar alumni or have ties to Vassar. So whether that means reaching out through the administration, someone who would know, or the various alumni networks, we can also, as org chair, I could also be a liaison between all of the orgs on campus and the CDO if they want to co-sponsor an event with a relatively well-known Vassar alumni. I think those are very good places to start, and who knows, if we can get the Obamas to campus, that will be my #1 priority next year if it's feasible. Just saying.
Thank you so much.
Of course.
So the next student question is, how do you plan to keep orgs accountable? And you have 1 minute.
Yeah, so we've dealt with this past year. There have been a lot, or not necessarily a lot, 2 or 3 issues or circumstances that have come up that have required the VSA to launch investigations. The SJP and voice speaker issue this during the first semester was a complicated issue, and as a result, the orgs committee, which I was on and helped to do with, launched an investigation, into the actions by SJP and the speaker from voice. And we looked at the facts. We looked at what actually happened, what was supposed to happen, what necessarily could have been done better. And with this investigation, it was the best way to examine what happened. And if something would come up in the future, this is probably what we do if that would come up.
Thank you. So we'll now move on to the closing statement portion. It will be 1 minute as well. Are you all set?
I am.
Awesome.
Cool. So to end my time with you, I'd like to leave you from a quote from Red Foreman from That 70s Show. He said, "I should get this job because I'm, quote, experienced, loyal, and hardworking," end quote. And I just like to say that I am, I believe, experienced, loyal, and hardworking. I will put all my effort into being the org chairs, or the chair of orgs, and make sure that I put a lot of time into the summer, making sure that we hit the ground running in the fall with the Fall Leadership Conference, and make sure that I'm available to all orgs via email over the summer, and have office hours to make sure that I can truly be that resource for all orgs. I look forward to being your chair of orgs next year, and just like to thank the MIS for holding this debate, and I'd like to thank all the voters, and remember to vote.
Thank you so much, Alistair.
Of course.
Great, so we can move on now to the Chair of Residential Affairs. Is Lily here? Looking around. Hi, Lily. Let me unmute you. Okay, hi, Lily.
Hi.
Awesome. Wonderful. So again, same deal. Let's begin with a 30-second opening statement. It should include your name, pronouns, and the position that you're running for.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lily. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I'm running for Chair of Residential Affairs. I'm a rising junior, and this year I served as Strong House President, which made me really appreciate and really want to change some things about House Team, and then also want to connect that to the student body as a whole.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We'll move on to the question portion. You'll have 1 minute to answer each question. The first question is, the Chair of Residential Affairs will work closely with a number of different offices of the college, including Res Life, Safety and Security, Dining, CIS, and Student Conduct. How would you approach working with these separate groups, and what do you hope to prioritize during that time?
Yeah, so one of the biggest things I want to do when working with these different really essential like departments of the school is prioritize transparency between the students and these orgs, especially with things like dining and campus security. I feel like there are a lot of myths that go around, and whether or not they're true is something that like I don't even know right now. So I'm hoping that like in having communication with all these departments, I could clarify that for the general student body. And yeah, I just hope that there wouldn't be this loss of communication with where it kind of ends coming to me from the services that we have.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. So a lot of your position is sort of up in the air given the current circumstances that may persist into the fall. But should we be in person in the fall, one of your responsibilities would be to offer guidance and support to house teams. How would you envision bridging the gap between students, house teams, and VSA Senate?
So one of the biggest things that I want to do if I were to be elected is to have house officers, so not just the presidents, but the treasurers, secretaries, and programming directors be much more included with VSA, as they are supposed to get all of their support from VSA. That doesn't really happen right now. And I think in doing that, the house team as a whole could really see more of the inner workings of VSA, and also the opinions of people on house teams could be better represented to VSA. And I think that house teams are a really good link between VSA and the general student body if they were to be included more in VSA, because a lot of people talk to their student fellows, they talk to members of house team because they trust them and they're visible. And so I think by prioritizing that connection between VSA and house team, it could really extend to the rest of campus.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So we now have time for 2 questions from the audience. I'll enter the waiting period and give everybody a chance to type. Wonderful. We have our first and second audience question. The first audience question is, as chair of residential affairs and former Strong president, does it make sense to have Strong be an all-women's dorm, but LGBTQI friendly? Shouldn't all of our dorms be equally open to all genders, particularly after 50 years of coeducation? You have 1 minute to answer.
So this is one of the myths that we work really hard as a house team to combat. Strong is not an all-women's dorm. It is gender inclusive. We changed our mission statement a few years ago, and since then it has been welcome to pretty much anyone who wants to live there. There are typically not many cis male that live in Strong, but in terms of legal standpoints, there's no one who's not permitted to live there. So I don't see it as not open to anyone. It is a special space where people can feel like they're surrounded by people who maybe have gone through similar things as them. And it's a space where we all really celebrate our identities. But the one thing it's not is an exclusionary space. So I wouldn't say there's any reason to change that. Strong is a special space, but not an exclusionary one.
Thank you so much. The next audience question is, do you plan to continue the efforts to get payment for house officers? And you have 1 minute.
So I do plan to continue those efforts. I was on the committee this year, obviously, as a House president, and we worked very hard to get in a proposal to ResLife about getting house officers paid, as they are the only unpaid members of house team, which has caused a lot of difficult dynamics. We did actually get that proposal approved, so we made a lot of progress this year. However, we couldn't actually get them compensated because of what happened at the end of the year with all the budgets kind of going crazy. But now that we have our foot in the door, kind of, I hope to take that proposal to the deans who can really implement it, and then hopefully have some kind of starting compensation for house officers by the 2021-2022 school year. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lily. So we'll move on to your 1 minute closing statement. Are you all set? Awesome.
So I just want to thank everyone for being here and having this discussion. I really want to say to everyone, make sure to vote, no matter who you vote for, because there's been a lot of upset feeling kind of thing with like not feeling represented. And I think that elections are a really good way to make sure that you're picking the best people to represent you. And I really think that Chair of Residential Affairs is a really important position right now because it's supporting a lot of really vulnerable people on the campus who don't necessarily get a lot of support from admin. So yeah, thank you for being here and remember to vote.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Lily. I'm going to check to see if we have any candidates for Chair of Health and Wellness. Real quick. Okay. All right. So from a quick scan, it doesn't look like we have any candidates for Chair of Health and Wellness present. So that concludes our executive board debate. It was really nice to meet everybody, and thank you so much for coming, and we wish you the best of luck in the election and health and wellness to you and your families. Just so you know, the video of this debate will be found on the MISC's website by the end of this evening, and if you feel like you've missed anything that you want to say, we're giving all of the candidates the opportunity to submit one tweet to the MISC for us to tweet out. This is completely optional. You don't have to do it if you feel like you covered it. How many characters? So 300 characters. But yeah, that should be it. Thank you all so much for coming.